So welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
That's wonderful that you can. So I'm just going to bow out now, but just invite you now to tell your story, and then we'll come back with how this all started for you, how it progressed, how you came to terms with your experiences, and what it's like speaking about it publicly now too. So, and then we'll come back and ask some questions if that's okay.
Oh, it's great. I love questions.
Great. Okay. I'm just going to bow out. Here we go.
Well, like uh, like she said, I'm Chris O'Connor, and it really is a pleasure to be here and to meet you all from Australia. It's a place I've never been, but it's on my bucket list. I'd love to visit. But yeah, in 1968, I was born to my parents in Southern California. And I actually recall the process of choosing my parents. I know that sounds, some people understand that concept. They have memories of that or such, but I've been fortunate in many ways to have retained a lot of memories from even past lives. And I remember choosing my parents, and part of the reason I chose them was because I wanted to work in with what we now colloquially call the secret space program, which is some programs that I think that most everybody's kind of familiar with now, especially the United States has got programs that they're off planet. They have ships that travel thousands of light years and throughout the solar. So I wanted to be part of that, and I came in prior to being incarnated. I made an agreement with the United States military. Now, I don't have an exact memory if it was with the Air Force or if it was with the United States Navy, but I worked with both in my experience. So, but I don't know who my contract was with necessarily. Um, so what they did, like I said, I was born in 1968. In 1970, they came to my home. I was 2 years old. We were living in Southern California, and it was in the evening time. My parents were in the living room watching television, and I was in my crib. I was two. They placed me in there, and but I could see out the door, and I would be watching television. So I was standing there holding on to the crib, the bars. My head was over it, but so I was watching television, and then suddenly, between me and the door, which was only a couple of feet away, the doorway, this man appeared. And he was just really kind of nondescript at that time because I was two. My memories weren't great, obviously, but I just remember him appearing and he was wearing all dark clothes, like a military uniform, but just very plain. And then he reaches in to my crib and picks me up under the arms. And he picks me up and he's kind of holding me out, right? He doesn't want to like bring me in. He's kind of holding me out. And then suddenly we're somewhere else. Um, and I don't know if it was a flash of light, I don't remember exactly what I experienced, except for I was in my room being held by this man. And the next thing I know, we're walking down a hallway. It was like real bright hallway because the room was dark. So it was like a instant transition. So there we are walking down. He's holding me out, walking me down this hallway. And he takes me into a room. And this room, I don't remember much about it, but it was like a laboratory sort of space. And then he hands me off to somebody. And I just recall being stripped down and wiped down, like with what we call, some people call nappies, wet naps, there's just wet cloths. And I guess it's, to kill bacteria. I don't know what it was for, but they were preparing me for the next steps. And what they did basically, they have there's this United States military has technology to rapidly grow tissue, human tissue, any kind of living cellular tissue, they can rapidly grow it. And it's through this gel. And this gel, it's like like a lavendery pink sort of color. So what they did, to make a long story short, what they did was they placed me in this tank with this gel. Now this gel is grown with with the DNA of the person being placed in it. So somewhere they had my DNA before I got there, but they had enough gel, and so they basically drowned me in the gel. There's a lot more details, but we don't need to go into those right now. It's too long of a story. But they drowned me in it, and they kept me in that a tank of this gel because I was still alive, even though they compressed all the air out of my lungs. But then when I breathed this gel in, I it was traumatizing and it burned, but it was anesthetizing, so it kind of numbed my body. And there was enough oxygen. Somehow it was like liquid oxygen or something. I'm not 100% sure what the gel is consists of, but I was getting enough oxygen. So I do remember that. And then I was just out. And I learned later that it was 4 or 5 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long. And in that time, this gel rapidly grows you. Now, unfortunately, for this process to happen, they also have to inject throughout your whole body that same gel so that they'll inject it into organs, they'll inject it into joints or near bones so that that gel can get to the tissue within your body. And then what happens is that way everything grows at basically the same rate. So your internal organs, your bones, and your everything externally grows at the same rate. So they grew me to what we would consider to be like a 25-ish-year-old young man. And now I'm a 25-year-old young man with the brain of a 2-year-old, which, wasn't great. But they took me out of the tank after they grew me to that place. And all I remember was just being terrified. I was scared. I was crying all the time. Here I'm a 25-year-old body crying like a 2-year-old child. And that lasted for, I don't know, I think they said something to about 2 days or something. It was a while. But what they couldn't do anything for me at the time. They had to let me basically calm down because the nervous system, everything was growing so quickly that it was just a really crazy, couple of days. Then after I kind of adjusted and I calmed down, then they have the technology also to adjust memory of anybody that they want. So they basically unlock my memories for lack of a better term. They just unlock the memories, and there's a whole technology behind it. But again, let's make the story too long for you guys. But they unlocked my memories, and then I remembered why I was there. I remembered I actually agreed to do this. And this was the only process to go through. Um, and part of my agreement was I would spend 20 years serving the United States military, which I did. And I served the military on Earth, under some what they call DUMS, deep underground military base. And also, I was on the surface in southwest of the United States, I believe. From I visualize it, I can see what it is, but I don't remember that that's exactly it. But it was deserts, for many, many miles. And I worked for them for well, a couple of years in that location, and then a couple of years other locations. But they also what they started to do was train me to use these devices. And these devices that they have are able to delete memory from a person, but they can also transfer consciousness, from one body to another body. Now, for that to happen, it has to be the same DNA. So it's not like you can just put one person's consciousness in another body. The consciousness has to be drawn to the DNA. And that's done through the pineal gland. I could describe all of that for you guys. You can always ask the question if you want to know more about it. I can tell you. But it basically, once you're transferred out into another body, it's just like just a matter of adjusting to the new body. So I actually had to do that once. I was actually killed while negotiating with another alien race, and I was shot and killed. And they rushed me to the infirmary, and was you have about 2 hours after a person is killed, their body's dead. You have about 2 hours. The consciousness hangs out in there, and the soul hangs out, for a bit, and so you can draw it out, and they draw it out, and that's what they taught me to do, and they taught me to whenever other soldiers and other people were in the program, when they left the program, they would delete your memories, your entire memory of the time you were there. If it was 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, or longer, they can delete it. And it sounds really crazy, I know, but this is alien technology. This is not technology that we received or that we developed. We traded for it, and part of what they traded was, soldiers to other races, and also abduction sometimes. So it's not the best one technology, to be honest. But they traded much technology, the United States and other countries with other races. That's how we've developed over the last 40 years, so incredibly quickly, was through trade of technology. Actually, it's been like 60 or 70 years, really. So again, with my story, for the first 20 years, I served on Earth doing different things. And then after 20 years, I was moved to a space station. And this was kind of the plan all along, because that's really where I wanted to serve my time, was working on the space station outside of Saturn. It's the first moon of Saturn. We call it Mimas. We call the moon Mimas, but that's actually a space station. Um, and it's got thousands of aliens that live on it, and there are hundreds of different races and species. And so we have an Earth embassy there, and that's the work I wanted to do. And so they took me to Mimas, and I started working there at the Earth embassy. And a lot of what the work that I did was negotiating with other races. And often, like I said, there's no money, out there with between races. The things that are important are technology, star maps, labor, crystals, and that type of stuff. So we would trade all the time one of those things. And like when I say star maps, it's like there are ways to travel through the galaxy, through the solar system, and through the universe, if you know how to do it. And it's a matter of, long story short, you can, if you have a ship that'll travel 99.9 the speed of light, then you can, in fact, exit that trajectory. So you're going at a straight line. You can't help but go on a straight line at that speed, obviously. But the technology that we would trade, the information we would trade, was the angle at which you exit that trajectory at 99.9 the speed of light, and how fast you slow down, and when along that trajectory you exit. When you know these things, then you can do that, and you can travel back in time to different locations. And so that's really highly sought after information. So the United States traded stuff for that too, and other races trade back and forth for these things. So a lot of my work on the Mimas space station was negotiating these things, and I was still technically under the U.S. military, but you know, I did this type of work. So I didn't do super soldier work, which I think you guys must be aware of that. A lot of the people that I've known were out literally like they were fighters, they were soldiers. They went out and they protected things, or they went out and went on to battles to protect different because we have Earth humans have quite a number. Last I knew it was like over 120 different locations that other hu Earth humans were on. Different space stations, or it could be another planet or a moon, or any sort of place. We have had that many people, so that requires a lot of protection at times. Because there's most of the races I worked with, and I met well over 100 um, different races. The vast majority, I would say like 90%, 95% even, are either positive or indifferent to humans. And most of them are positive that we worked with, but there were a few races that were not. And those are the races that we know about, the draconians and some of the gray species as well, are some of the nefarious, malevolent races. And so we kind of had to work with them. We kind of avoided it, but when you're because a good portion of the work that we had to do there was making it right because there are not all Earth humans that left Earth are positive, doing positive things, trying to advance humanity. Um, some of them are out trying to conquer other races, trying to, just get slave labor, kidnapping people and stuff like that. So and the thing about the reason we had to apologize is because how it works out in the universe when you're seen as your race. So we're seen as Earth humans, even if we've split apart and there's another group that are doing really bad things that none of us would ever do. If in one case, they went to a planet and they wanted, I don't remember exactly what they wanted, but they wanted to I think it was like quartz crystals or some sort of crystal or something. And they wanted it very cheaply, of course. But this race said no, they didn't really want to trade with them to begin with because they knew they were bad Earth humans, not good Earth humans. So this group actually attacked them, attacked their planet, and killed about 300,000 of them, and took what they wanted anyway. Well, naturally, they're seen by all the other hundreds of races, they're seen as Earth humans. So a lot of our job at the Earth Embassy there is apologizing and trying to make it right. And that's a lot of what my job was, and finding a way to work through, and how can we make it right, this terrible incident. Um, and so that was a lot of my job. Then a lot of the other stuff that I would have to do would be dealing with telepathics, doing telepathic work. And I was trained to do telepathic work. Most races really don't speak audibly like we speak. If they do, it's limited. And some of them do, of course, We're talking about hundreds of races. Most of them are more advanced, where they're beyond the need for verbal communication. They can telepathically do this much faster. You can drop a whole concept in an instant in someone's mind versus sitting down and trying to describe it with words is much more cumbersome. So they just don't. And they're very patient with me, with all of us Earth humans. They were very patient because they know we're just barely off the planet. Most of us don't even know that we're off the planet. And so they know that we have a lot of growing to do. So they're very tolerant of us. Um, but that's kind of in a nutshell, my basic experience. There, we did mention other technologies, and one thing I did learn about high technology out in space was that the higher the density, the higher the technology, the higher it is, the development, speaking of development, the higher it is, the simpler it is. And everything in some form or fashion is based in magnetism and crystals. And so a lot of what I saw, I've seen interdimensional or intergalactic engines that on ships that the United States owns. I saw one of the engines and it was just a giant crystal, with spinning mercury and being shot at by a type of laser that I'm not familiar with in this, I don't recall. And it created this energy that allowed that ship to travel at tremendous speeds. So I was exposed to all these technologies. And like I said, I spent the first 20 years working on Earth. And then when I went to Mimas, I spent 40 years there. And yeah, that's 60 years total. Um, and I know it's kind of hard to believe, obviously, because I'm not even 60 in this body. But what they do when you've ended your contract, because I renegotiated a contract every 20 years. And my third contract that I was negotiating with the military was that um, I wanted to bring technology back, one specific piece of technology back and share it with humans, share it with the earth, because it was so incredibly beneficial. And that's it right here, these two little things you see. It's called the DEEMS device. And so I wanted to bring it back because it helps people with pain relief and with helps tissue grow more quickly. It's just a little handheld thing that you use. And I wanted to bring it back. And they said, yeah, sure. Yeah. So I didn't want them to come after me if I started building these things when I came back. And they said, well, sure, absolutely. Because they'll agree to anything because they say you're not going to remember anyway. We're going to wipe your memory. So you're not going to remember. But they didn't tell me that until later. Although I was working doing some of the memory wiping, so I knew. I'm sure I knew that they were going to try to do that, but I would get in arguments with my superiors like, I'm going to remember this. They're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to remember this. And I remember their faces and kind of it'd make them mad. But but I think because of my determination, I actually was really able to remember so many things. And that's what I wanted to bring back to humanity was that information, first of all, that, hey, we're not alone, first of all, on Earth. And not only are we not alone, we've known it for a long time, and many of the world's nations are traveling outside our solar system. And we're doing it in these massive ships. Some of you may have heard of Solar Warden. That's the United States, a massive, what you call it, a battleship out in space. And they literally, the United States alone literally has thousands of ships. Most of them are unmanned. Most of the UFOs or many of the UFOs that we see here on Earth, a lot of times are humans. They're human ships, but not all of them, but many of them are because we have so many thousands of ships, and so that's a lot of what we see. But they are every bit as amazing as the ones that are non-human. But something I tell people is if you're ever abducted, which there's not a lot of abductions going on these days, but if you're ever abducted, look at the ship, pay attention to the ship. And if there are seams in it, or rivets especially, but if there are seams in the ship, they're humans. Because those ships, the other ships that are non-human, they're created more often than not by thought, the power of thought. And they can think these ships they can transmute material through the energy of thought. And they create these ships, so there are no seams. So I said, pay attention, if you're abducted. And if there seems, then you're dealing with humans from Earth. So I'm not 100% sure where to go next. I think maybe at this point I've dropped so much information. Maybe it might be good to get questions so I know what you guys want to know about, if that works.
Well, I'm going to jump in with a few questions to start with, like, how many pages of notes did I take? No, I won't hog all the space. Um, Couple of things you said very early on, which I'd heard before. It's quite common for experiences to have very early memories. And you said
Mm.
you had these memories when you were very young. I can't, you said you're in a crib. Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, that's not uncommon at all. And also
Yeah.
being wiped down possibly for bacteria with people who've had these encounters too. That I've heard that many times, or sprayed down and it's immediately dried off, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing is, I wanted to ask from that experience that you said you had with the increasing speed of the tissue growth, are you now having any health problems because of that?
No,
No.
no, I really, the only issues I have are injuries, usually because I manage to injure myself all the time.
Right.
But I was in the ER a few years ago. I had fallen about 16 feet, several meters, and I landed on this huge pile of steel. And I ended up with just a cut, And so I had my arm here. I was in the ER, and this doctor was face to face with me, and he was sewing up he was putting staples in my arm. He goes, because he had done an examination, he goes, "You are industrial strength." He said, "This would have broken anybody else." I
Hmm.
said, "Yeah, well, that's me."
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's really weird. It might be
Yeah.
like that. Um, the also, other thing I wanted to ask too was when you were advanced physically, when at the end of that contract, were you taken back to childhood to physically as a child? What happened?
At the end of the third term, the
Yeah.
60 years, what they did, because they can easily clone other humans, easily. So what they do is they create a clone at the same age which I was taken. And then they move the consciousness and everything. And there's no memories. There's no need to move memories because they just deleted it all before they moved me.
Yeah.
I remember the moment they did that, actually. I remember being in the room and I remember them putting this device up right at my temple and pushing a button, and then I was out. But I knew that process because that's what I did for other soldiers that were leaving the program. So I knew exactly what they were doing. And I was arguing the whole time, going, "I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember this." And they were like, "Give them a double dose, right?"
Yeah, yeah.
But no, then they move those. Um, they can move the consciousness because it's attached to the pineal gland, and they because we all have like fingerprints that are individual. We all have a frequency that's individual as well. And so our consciousness, our soul, our spirit, it's all based and attached to the DNA of the body, but through the frequency of the pineal gland. So they have this device that copies that frequency and they push a button and it attracts it out because it's a stronger signal than the one that the pineal gland puts out. So with me, they had me in there. They pushed the button, pulled out my consciousness, and then it went over to the 2-year-old me and then released this button. And then now it's no longer it has a signal and it's sucked into the pineal gland of the 2-year-old clone. And then that's how they transfer. It's really literally that fast, you know. So that's how they do it.
Mm,
And then they move you back in time and dropped me back. The only thing that was unusual, there was no real noticeable time missing that I was ever told about. It's just that somehow I got from my crib and I locked myself, they thought, in the closet. So they didn't return me to the crib. They returned me to a closet, a closed door, and but I couldn't reach the knob. So, so my mom and my aunt were kind of arguing about, well, who put him in the closet kind of thing.
mm. Okay, so just to clarify in my own little mind, you and maybe someone else's, but so age two, you're taken, your consciousness is removed, put into a clone. Is that right?
Not when I was taken.
Not when you were taken.
Not when I was taken, they can do that, and they do that, but it's less stable. And because I was going to do telepathic work, because my native race are telepaths, and they needed the connection that when I was born into the body, then you have a tighter connection. Your soul is in there more secure. So instead of moving me to a copy, a clone of myself, um, which is less stable, then they put you in this gel and they grow you, and so you retain it that way. They only moved me. I was killed at one time and had to be transferred, to save my life because they, had a younger version. It was like 20 years younger than the one I was living in at the time. It was my original body. And then my original body was shot and killed. They moved me into about a 25-year-old again because that's just where they kept them for emergencies. And then they moved me again into a 2-year-old and returned me.
Okay, so your parents had no knowledge of a gap in your life.
Nothing noticeable.
Nothing that,
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to duck out now. And oh, one more thing I just wanted to quickly ask you too was the work that you did, you said it was mostly telepathic or was all telepathic. It seems that you were suggesting that the work you did was of a diplomatic nature. Is that right? You're trying to appease make a lot of apologies for what's happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That was it was like the job of a diplomatic genre. I've had other people tell me they remember me, and they said, "No, you were an ambassador." I'm like, "Well, I don't remember being an ambassador. I just remember doing the work." So I never claimed that. But yeah, but I was still under the military. No matter what I was doing, I still had to answer to them. So
Right. Okay, I'm going to duck out now and let other people. I've got sees a couple of hands up in the.
pretty much every advanced race, and when I say advanced, it's at least fourth density and above. Every single one of them know that there is a singular creator. Most of them refer to them as source, but they all know that there's a singular creator of the whole of the universe. The journey and the purpose for our living any lifetime, but especially multiple lifetimes, and this goes for every race out there. This is what we all have in common, is that we are all trying to evolve our soul, right? Trying to become a better person or whatever. There's a lot of negativity, I understand that, but negativity ends after the sixth density. They all transmute to positive. But until then, we have this disparity of positive and negative. But the whole journey is for experience for the creator. For we're all a part of God. We're all equal portions of God. We're all living experience to return to God. And as we evolve our soul, we evolve our physical form as well. And that evolution of our physical form becomes lighter and lighter until we turn into light. We become light. And then as we go through the journey of being the frequency and vibration of light, ultimately we end up with enough experience and with a high enough frequency and vibration that we are at the same level of God, of Source. So then we have the option to return and reunite with God if we choose. If we would like to continue our experience, then we can go backwards at any time and continue our experience. But that's the journey. And this is one of the universal understandings. When I say universal, I literally mean universal understandings that there is a singular source and that we're all working through experience to return to that source. No, and that was part of what I have a contract with
Hmm.
the military. They told me I was going to forget about having one, and I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
And I actually remember the contract number. So I'm like, and I remember in that contract, I'm allowed to talk about whatever I want to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I think they were counting on me not remembering that, but no, I remember it. So no, I've never had an issue
Yep.
um, with anything on that line.
Okay.
Yes, uh, I do know that that existed and does exist.
Hmm.
Especially, there's been a lot of work by some very benevolent forces that are mostly human, but being guided by some higher benevolent angelic forces, trying to stop all that and get it cleared off this planet. And that's that. But the Earth, we humans have to clean up our own mess. And so that's the process we're in. So yes, there have been many programs on that level. Um, and we see them every single day. We just don't know it. And there have been others that, that if we would see, we would know. But those programs, as far as I know, have ended, or there's been a lot of work to end them and try to make sure that they're no longer happening. But I don't know the latest report. I do know that there are some to be reported there. I don't recall the moment where there's reported to be. I know the biggest major ones. There's one in Norway, Finland area. There's one under Los Angeles, um, in South America, out in the ocean, um, a couple places in Russia. There's a big base in oh gosh, well, Antarctica. I mean, that's like the biggest one. Yeah, so they're scattered around, and I know there's supposed to be a couple bases in Australia, but I just don't recall where they are. Yes to all of that. Um, I do have a couple that I really love. In fact, if you want to share screen, I can show you a couple of paintings I've done of some of my favorite ones. So, I have not done too many, but um, there's one that's a Arcturian Andromedan mix, hybrid, and they are wonderful, wonderful people. They have these eyes that are just remarkable, and I would just stare because their eyes they're small eyes, big round head, but small eyes, and these eyes look like they have gases, like they're out in space, like they're nebulae moving, and they're different colors, and with their emotions and thoughts, these swirls of light in their eyes will change and move. So I'll just be standing there staring at their eyes, and they were very tolerant. But one of them became my friend for 40 years. And he kind of had the same position I had for his race.
Mm.
And then there was another race that they were like, uh, they looked like something you would see off of Planet of the Apes. They're very loving, very, very loving. They love human clothes, and they would wear human fashion. They just thought that was the greatest thing. And there's some really, and this is what I'd love people to experience even a little, is the love that's out there. These higher density beings, it's amazing love. I don't think that we would be fighting amongst ourselves here on Earth if we felt that love. It's just, how could we?
Mm.
So
Do you want to share those images now or while you're
yeah, if you guys want to see them, I'll show
you can,
you.
you can share. Yeah, share screen, no problem.
Okay. I gotta remember how to do this. Okay.
Open your
Here,
file.
okay. Did under share? Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yep, yep.
Okay. So here, this particular entity, they evolved, so they're entities of light now. And the emanation of love from these guys, these are like what people think or see as angels. And they just come into your space and you're just like everything around you is just surrounded with this warm blanket, fuzzy blanket of love. Oh, they're just remarkable. And I don't remember any of these race names. I'm the one thing they were really good at was erasing the names um, that I had. This is the Arcturian um, Andromedan hybrid, and I don't know if I can zoom in too much, but let me see. Well, I can't really. Well, if you could kind of see their eye, how they're sparkling. That's what I was talking about. So this guy's name is the only name that I remember. His name was Jigadim, and Jigadim, and he became my friend. I think the reason I remember his name is because he was my friend for like 40 years. So I remembered him, and he was about 5.5 feet tall, and you see what he looks like there, kind of a blue, but also kind of gray at the same time. Um, this is a race. I didn't draw his face. He requested I not draw his face because he was concerned that it would frighten people, and he didn't want to create the frequency of fear for anybody. So I said, okay, let me draw everything else. So and this is actually one of the races that I was mentioning that the Dark Fleet, some negative humans went and killed 300,000 of them on their planet. This is the race that they did that. This these guys, I know their name, and I have to always have to look it up. So I should put it on the drawing so I remember. But um, they they have obviously the shape of like like a cobra, the cobra when their head is flared out. But they have this nose of like an elephant seal, and they have the skin texture of an elephant seal as well. And they have a mouth and stuff, but it's underneath the nose. This race are incredibly telepathic and kinetic, and they're well known for creating ships, spaceships, and the spaceships that they create are conscious ships. So the consciousness you can connect to the ship via your consciousness, and those are amazing ships I've been on, and it's like coming home and the little puppy that's jumping on you. They're really happy to see you, but it's a ship that's feeling this way. And this guy, this is the race that love human clothes. Um, and they look like kind of like a rhesus monkey or something. But their race was, I don't know where their planet is. I don't remember that, but they were not interfered with like humans were. So they got to evolve over many millions of years into an intelligent form. And then they left their own planet. And then they met the coalition of planets and became members, and they're one of the races helping to protect the Earth right now. So they're really great. This is a close up. I'll show you this. You see how he has those glasses on because they love the human design. There are no lenses in those glasses. He just likes to wear them because he said he looked good. So I'm like, well, you do. So yeah, go ahead. And they're very, very loving also. They're really wonderful to be around beings. I think that's kind of it just for the races that I have on this computer. So there's a few of them. I'm still working on getting more drawn. So we'll go back to this. Um, I don't, again, with names, I don't remember the name. I'm part of this race that we have been building um, suns to create solar systems. The process is mostly natural, but what we were able to do is when we could stimulate clouds of gas, basically, we could stimulate those clouds and dense clouds of gas, and we can introduce other gases and other elements so that when they coalesce into a sun, it's a certain type of sun. And that's what we did. And basically, long story short, we manufactured suns. Um, so we took advantage of a natural process and would create certain types of suns for certain areas and certain races that needed certain types of environments. All of my foundational memories I have never forgotten. Even though I was a little kid, my parents legitimately, I guess, think about it. I would tell my parents these crazy things, and they're like, "No, you dreamed it," or "You have a vivid imagination." And I'm like, "Okay, I accepted it for many years," but they never went away. Those memories, they were always there, and I'm like, "But no, really, I remember being in space." So many of my well, really all of my foundational memories, I have never forgotten. And then I do through a series. I did one memory regression thing one time, and that brought a few things back. And then in meditation, I would communicate with guidance, my angels or whatever, and they would help me bring memories in meditation. And then so really what they were doing was they would drop memories in, and it's like if you've ever had the experience of suddenly remembering and knowing everything about a specific subject that you never had before, and it was all there in an instant. It's just an unlock. Sometimes they're downloads, but no, that so in answer to your question, all three I've employed to kind of make sense of the memories that I've always had. Yeah, essentially, uh, what our pineal gland, very small little thing, right in basically the center of our brain, and it has within it calcite crystals. That's very natural. We want that. When I'm not talking about calcification, I'm talking about calcite crystals within the pineal gland. It's natural. We're born with them and we want them. And then we have the CFS, the cerebral spinal fluid, and that fluid surrounds and is part of that pineal gland, and it puts hydraulic pressure on on the calcite crystals. Now, what happens when you do that is, if you know anything about putting stress or pressure on a crystal, what you create is a piezoelectric energy. And that's the energy that runs through our nervous system, and our brain operates off piezoelectric energy. And our pineal gland creates that energy. So we want that. We want to have those crystals in there. So what happens is when we create that energy, everybody's pineal gland is slightly different. The crystals grow slightly differently. There's a slightly different number of them, and they're under different pressure. So the pressure the pineal gland puts on the crystals in your brain creates a frequency. You could actually tune into it if you have the right technology. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what you would really want to know. I mean, that the subject goes on and on, because I could talk about how we use the frequency that our brain creates to manifest things, how that frequency can be taken advantage of by other races, and that's how they connect to you. And there's a whole bunch of things that we could, it started in the 40s, 50s. President Eisenhower, he literally met with some alien races face to face, and they wanted to communicate with everybody. It turns out they weren't good guys, but it was something. So Eisenhower, his administration said, no, my people aren't ready for it. So they didn't. Although there was another group of entrepreneurs, basically. And these entrepreneurs wanted the technology because they were offering technology in exchange for, research and for DNA samples of humanity and stuff like this. Well, Eisenhower said no. So they created what they called the Majestic 12, which was 12 men that owned these major corporations and had most of the money, certainly in the United States. So they contacted these beings. And so then they were able to take all that technology and create corporations and make billions of dollars. And so they're still being weeded out of this whole scenario. And in my experience, most of the people that I was working with um, that were human from Earth would be like, why are we not telling everybody this? Why are we hiding it? Nobody would be fighting amongst each other. Nobody would be doing any of this crap if they knew what was going on out in space. I'm like, yeah, right. And many of the other races also felt that way. They were like, why? They understood that we were still evolving and there was a lot of trouble amongst us and we're fighting amongst each other. And they know that we're not ready, really. We just aren't ready to really have the experience as a global humanity. Many of us as individuals are. So it's hard to get out of the lie you told. It's hard to explain why it is you have warehouses underground full of technology that could save humanity, wipe out poverty, wipe out disease. They they have it. These corporations and these people. And so until these people are out of the picture entirely, And then people have proven, especially here in the United States, that if a ship lands, we're not going to shoot and kill whoever comes out of it. Until they know and they're safe with that, they're just going to keep doing it super slow until they're sure that we're not going to be a problem. So it's us, until we can prove that we're ready, it'll just be slow.
So we have to grow into disclosure.
Yeah, and keep talking about it. And that's really one of the biggest reasons I decided to tell my story, because I wanted people to know, even if they didn't believe me, it's fine, just hear me. You don't have to believe me, because that grows humanity and it helps humanity become ready. And that's why I created the DEEMS device, because people that use that think it's a miracle. I'm like, well, it's not a miracle, it's technology from another race, but thank you. And so it's just part of the evolution. And I'm just, I think the more people that do tell their story, the more people that basically are brave enough to do it and not care what people think about them, then fewer and fewer people will be judged for it, and people become more comfortable with the subject matter, and will move on and be ready.
You talked a lot about trade. What's the Earth trading in for technology, etc.?
Labor is a big one. There are some, like I said, not necessarily good forces that come from Earth as well, that have their labor is slave labor. Most of the um, world superpowers that have ships out there and that are trading, labor. So it's like military labor, and so it's a part of their agreement, because we don't have a whole lot to give except for other minerals. We're in charge of another planet that's related similarly to Earth size wise, but so I think it's smaller if I recall. But it's locked in a gravitational lock with Earth. So we're both traveling around the sun on the opposite side, so we can't ever see each other. And the Earth is in charge of that, and it's full of minerals. And so we trade a lot of those minerals as well.
He also wants to know, how much does the US president know about the secret space program? Do you think?
Depends which president, for one. Um, I think they all know some, have always known some, because a lot of the races that deal with, they like, no, does your leader understand them? It's like, not take me to your leader necessarily, but, do the right people know, and so because they try to, especially the benevolent forces that mostly we're working with now, they want to know that if decisions need to be made at the highest levels, even though the president of the United States doesn't really have that much power. But in my belief, they all have at least a broad understanding. They have to. Um, well, it was very different because there's a lot of different races. So as far as on the time, we always went on Earth time. Earth in the Pacific, where, kind of where it goes through where you guys are, where that's where the day begins, sort of thing. It's that time. And that's where all the ships, everything that we have out there go off of that time, as far as I know, I never remembered what I ate. I don't know why. And I think, well, I do. I think most of the time is because I was put in stasis. I was in stasis probably 70% of the time I was gone.
Wow.
And the reason for that was because I had all this telepathic ability and I was trained in telepathy. And because I negotiated a lot of contracts and I worked with a lot of different races, nefarious races who are highly telepathic would attack me all the time. And not, I wasn't the only person that did this. There were quite a few of us. But we would be put in stasis because in stasis they couldn't reach our mind and they couldn't extract information. So most of the time I was in stasis. Um, then what the space station looked like. If you know what the moon of Mimas looks like, this is an interesting story, really. In 73, I think, were the first photographs, or was it 77? First photographs of Mimas.
Mhm.
And those photographs came 3 years after the first Star Wars came out. Now, the Death Star in Star Wars was fashioned after Mimas, um, but we didn't have pictures of it publicly
Mhm.
until until years after Star Wars came out. So that was what we call soft disclosure. That was them telling us in the future, you're going to know this space station exists. And they just turned it into the Death Star. So it looks like the Death Star from the outside, but it's a rocky moon. It's a natural body. It was created just like the same forces that moons are created, traveling around their planet,
Mhm.
collecting material. But it was reworked to become a space station. And also, another concept that you have to understand in this is that higher densities have different material, different vibrational material, and they behave differently in physics terms than they do in our third density. So a third density ship from Earth would fly to Mimas, and what they see is a rocky moon with this giant crater. It looks like the nickname is that Mimas is nicknamed the Death Star moon because it looks just like it, but rocky. But now when our ships go there, we have what I don't remember the official name, but I call it a density engine. Now, with the density engine, you turn on the density engine, you can dial the frequency basically of the density you want to visit.
Mhm.
So Mimas resides in the eighth density, super high frequency, super high vibration. So when you fly up to it, you see a rocky moon, you turn on the density engine, creates this electrostatic field around the ship. And that field is tuned to what the eighth density you want to visit, or whatever density you want to visit. And so then your ship basically now sees this rocky moon as a metallic space station, because in the eighth density, it's a metallic space station. So that's what it looks like on the outside. On the inside, it looks like, at least because you can't visit the whole thing because atmospheres have to be different for different races. Some of it is all underwater, because of those races. Um, so the parts that I would visit was this giant shopping mall sort of look, uh, but it was really slick. It was glass and chrome and a lot of white. Everything was like white and like light colors and such as that. So like I remember standing on this balcony once, looking over and down into a plaza, and that plaza had several. I could see like some hotels that have the lobby is open to all the floors. It looked similar to that. To my left were these either windows or projections of what was outside of the windows. I don't know if they were actually windows. They may have just been giant TV screens showing you what's outside so you didn't, because they did that a lot, because it's safer than having a window in a space station. Um, so that was on the left. You could just see stars and other ships that are out there. And then down on the plaza was just a big white, like terrazzo flooring and this big giant tree that was on the left-hand side and a stairway that went around and came down. But every floor I could see probably, I don't know, 6 floors or so. Each one of those floors were at least 30 to 50, feet tall. So it's a massive space. And so I remember that particular view um, of the space station. So it's like white and glossy and beautiful on the inside. So the harvest started in 1983.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's not, because I grew up a fundamentalist Christian. We read the Bible and believed every word. Um, so I was raised to believe that Jesus is coming back on a giant chariot being drawn by a horse. And everybody's going to be reaped, you know, everybody's going to go to either to heaven or move on or whatever. It's not that way. It could be that way, but it's not the best way to do that because if that would create terror and trauma and it would damage souls to do that. So instead, they have been, and I say they, the malevolent or benevolent forces that are in protection of Earth right now are are there. And when events come up, when everybody dies right now, they do one of three things. If you're a negatively oriented soul and you're highly negative and you can move on to the fourth density negative and you die right now, you'll go to a place that supports that frequency and that negative vibration. So you'll go to a negative planet or whatever. If you're positive and you're eligible to, you've done enough work, your consciousness is higher, you had some enlightenment, and you have the ability to move into fourth density when you die right now, and you're positive and you're a native Earth human, then you'll return to Earth because the Earth is basically a positive planet. We just got to get rid of all the negative right now. Now, the bigger of those two groups, there's a third group, and most people will fall into this category. When they die, they're just not eligible to move to the fourth density. So they'll go into storage, essentially, for lack of a better term. They'll be stored until everybody's been collected over a number of years, and then they'll be moved and begin a reincarnation cycle on a fully third density planet. So they'll be able to go through that process. And the reason third and fourth density generally cannot remain on a single planet at the same time is because fourth density entities um, begin working with telepathy. They begin working with manifestation with the mind. They can create a home out of thought, and they can fly, and so they're evolving and they can disappear and not show themselves. Well, that would terrorize third density entities. And so people now are afraid when they see a ghost and they're like, no, it may not be what you think, So that's why third and fourth density can't remain on the same planet. So you're correct. They will actually go, somewhere else and continue their experience separately from fourth density entity people. Because the races that came down were not allowed to do it. They weren't allowed to come. They were they weren't they were negative races that came to Earth. The benevolent forces were trying to protect Earth until we were ready. These other negative ones came in because they wanted to have some form of control over humanity. And that control, in part, was dissension. So they only picked the superpowers. They went to other countries, but they picked the superpowers because they knew the superpowers would fight amongst themselves and create a lot of negativity and dissension. And then people would separate. We wouldn't be together because working together brings in the benevolent forces. So it was a whole plan to pit us against one another so that we would argue and complain and fight with one another. And it's worked quite well. So, it's a human nature anyway, to tend to do that. So they took advantage of it. So it wasn't positive races, and it was just part of a control mechanism they were trying to do. Well, they're getting mostly they get them when they're a little older, like military age, like for going into service. And there are a great many service members that are used as that labor. That's if it's kind of the positive side. It's just that their memories are erased when they come back. They don't know they were ever gone, or so it's very confusing. Um, the negative forces that would use Earth human labor created breeding programs, and they were kidnapped, and that's what they wanted to do when they came to the United States in the 50s. They wanted to abduct or take. They didn't say abduct. They wanted to get the DNA and breed 300,000 Americans in trade for technology, and that's what Eisenhower said. No, you can't do that. I won't let you do that. And so a lot of abductions and a lot of people that disappeared, a lot of them were, walking out in the woods by themselves and never came back, and because they were easy to take. Not that it's not really happening now like it was. There's still disappearances, of course, but those are different things. But for the most part, it was abductions at the beginning, and then these really malevolent races started breeding programs so that they're actually raising humans for slave labor. I don't think it's not as prevalent as it was, and that's part of what this, I mean, internal war that's going on. That's what's trying to be stopped. One of the many things that they're trying to stop the currently still negative people in charge of from doing.
Right.
Many children disappeared that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and people aren't talking about abductions now. Like it happened, there was a program, and it's been swept under the carpet. I just can't believe it. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's a discussion for another time.
Well, the first thing I would say, and that I do try to tell people, is that got to get your power back,
Okay.
because there's nothing in this world and out of it that can control you if you don't allow it.
Okay.
Now, probably this process began where, he didn't believe he had a stronger power and higher energy than whatever's, coming to him. But if this is why a lot of people, if they have these moments, they say in the name of Jesus Christ, well,
Yes.
because that's where they find their power.
Yes.
Wherever he can find his power to tell this thing to F off. But there are other things he can do also, and that is a process of raising his frequency and vibration to a point. If it's negative, it has to disconnect, because if you raise your vibration to a certain
Right.
point, they can't connect to you anymore. Well, there's something I tell. It's the simplest way I could start describing this to people is what I call practice CAL, the letter KAL. The K stands for kindness. Do something kind for somebody every day. Give them a compliment, send them a text, say hi, cook them a meal, whatever that is. So do something kind every day. Do something, the letter A, do something athletic. Do something to honor your physical body, your temple where you reside. Honor your body by doing something physical every day. And then do something that you love every day. And if you do that, those three things,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can't do it every day, but do what your best. If you do those three things, be kind to somebody in some form or fashion, do something athletic to help the physical body, and do something that you love. Every day you'll become your frequency raises a little bit more every time you do that. And that's the simplest thing I could tell people to do to raise your frequency. And meditate, of course,
Yeah.
and then try to learn to connect and speak and communicate with your guidance more, because
Okay.
then there's a protection that comes in with that. I have some techniques for creating crystalline spheres around you to protect you from outside signals.
So just before we go on to the DEEMS device, Chris, I just wanted to clarify my own mind. When you said the abductions have mostly diminished, and that I think you said something like that program has shut down or something like that, or finished. Who did that? Who decided we're not going to do that anymore, and why did they do that?
Well, it was never a positive thing.
Yeah.
And there's infighting within simple organizations. We kind of have to say three-letter organizations, and they're like all split. Like half of them are good, half of them are bad. So usually these negative ones were the ones doing some pretty nasty stuff
Mm.
because they were trading technology and supplying slave labor and stuff like that. And then there's the other half of these organizations and other benevolent uh, forces that have come in to help them and work with the secret space program and work with some of these super soldiers to clear these things out and to get these things taken care of. So it's an ongoing process because it's highly ingrained into the planet itself.
Mm. So I noticed around 2000 that abductions started to diminish. And over that 2000 to 2005, I was receiving reports of mixed motive cases where people would be having abduction experiences, followed by visitations by benevolent beings, and they felt that those benevolent beings were trying to undo what had occurred
Mhm.
to them during the abduction experiences. And then after that, they just almost became non-existent.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work to stop these programs
Mm.
and stop. There's still stuff going on, because we haven't cleared it out entirely yet, or they haven't. I'm not doing it.
Right.
Um, so
Mm.
hopefully, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so tell us about the DEEMS device.
Oh, sure. Well, like I said, when I was with the space program, we used that. I can show you guys one up close. It's a little easier to tell you. Um, the one in my memory, the one that I remember was silver like that, but this one I just grabbed the gold one. Um, the secret space program would use these to extract your memory and delete memory and to transfer your consciousness. Now, my version cannot do that and will never do it. But what I wanted to bring back and share with people and manufacture and share was the version that is not, because theirs is electronic, so it runs off battery and it's programmable. Mine is just all magnets. And the magnetic neodymium magnet uh, interacts. I was talking about the pineal gland that creates a frequency and electrical system in the body. This also creates the same piezoelectric energy. So it interacts with our nervous system directly and it relieves pain. I have people with severe pain, helps regrow tissue and stuff like that. So this is what I wanted to bring back to humanity. And that's what they said I wouldn't remember. They agreed to. No. Um, so, so basically there are 14 magnets, 13 in here in series. And there's also inside of it, this is basically an updated Ankh from Egypt. It's the same technology. It's just I did it differently. And there's 8 carats of diamonds in each one. And those diamonds help focus energy because as these magnets create a circuit, they come up and they want to come up and go around this magnet, right, to create a magnetic circuit. And this magnet is a ring magnet and it's polarized so that it pushes this way, right? So when the energy comes up and around, it's also being pushed out and it creates a vortex on this side. And that vortex is what you can use to interact with the body. So if you have, like one time I had really terrible, uh, an abscess tooth. And just like it was in the first year of me building these things and it was severe. So I was laying there. I just had it, on like that for half an hour, and it didn't help. The pain was still there, and I thought, oh my gosh, I got to stop building these things because they don't work. I'm defrauding people. I can't build these things anymore. And something just said leave it there for a little while longer. So I left it there for another 15 minutes. That pain was utterly gone and never came back. Well, it came back about. I was waiting to get into the dentist. They had long time appointments. And it came back like a week or so later, and I did that again for like 10 minutes. Then it was gone and it never came back. And that's the same story for many people. So people use it for Reiki, because it works with your nervous system and it works with your energy body, works on the meridians. A lot of Reiki people, masters use it. So that's what I brought back because I really wanted people to begin to heal themselves as naturally as possible. Because once we remember that we can use the energy that this device creates, it takes in all the earth energy around it and it amplifies it. So if we were still running around earthing all the time, we were barefoot and touching the earth and grounding, then we wouldn't need anything, really, because our body would have enough energy to heal itself because we draw in energy constantly. And this helps draw in ample, much, much more energy. And so our body can heal itself again because like I said, we're wearing shoes most of the time and we're in homes and we're not touching the earth because we're from the earth and the earth helps to heal us through the energy that the earth puts out. So this just replaces us being grounded to the earth like animals. This works on animals too. So that's the DEEMS device, and yeah, so that's it. If there's any questions, I can talk more about it. But other than that, that's in a nutshell, that's the DEEMS.
So what's the success rate with it, Chris? What's the feedback you're getting?
Well, I don't make claims because
Yeah.
they're not my stories, but I have hundreds of people. Somebody just wrote a review today and said that they truly believe that it is what cured their big C word, and I don't want to say it because of YouTube.
Yeah.
Um, that's I do know that according to the United States federal government, neodymium magnets, if you put it on your cheek, it will cure certain types of that disease.
Right.
And that's their own research showing that. And I'm like, that's why another reason I started building them. I'm like, why in the world our federal government, is saying that it actually does this and nobody's building anything for it. I'm like, well, I'll do it. And then that's when the memories all came in from it, because I've always remembered it in my visual memory
Mm.
since I was a little kid. Yeah.
So do you have that American government documentation on your website, or how do we access that? Or
Well, if anybody, I would have to look it up. I have a presentation that it's in. It's on the National Institute of Health and the National Library of Medicine. If you search their sites, you might be able to look up neodymium magnets and then maybe pull it in that way. But if you can't find it, send me an email and I'll send out a copy or something.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.